All right, welcome to the Next Level of Life show. I'm your host, Bill Hargenrader, creator of the Next Level of Life and best-selling author of Mars Journey Call to Action. Pretty cool interview today. I'm here with a guy named Mike Roush. He's a video game developer, and he's also this week they just put out Tharsis, which is a space-based strategy and dice game about how to get to Mars. And so we're doing an I Love Mars edition of the show. So let's welcome Mike. How's it going?
It's good. How are you, Bill?
Doing good, doing good. So I'm going to read your bio, and then we're kind of kick it over to you and just kind of give a little story about, how you got started doing what you're doing, and we'll move into talking about Tharsis. So I'm going to read your bio for Choice Provisions, co-founded by industry lifers Mike Roush and Alex Neuse?
Noise.
In 2008, with the famous last words of running a video game studio can't be that hard. So as they longed for greater creative freedom, they tore off their corporate shackles in favor of the self-flagellation of trying to do everything on their own. Several years later, and with more than 10 releases as a company, that's pretty cool, Choice Provisions continues to uphold its belief that great people accomplish great things together. And with a team of unparalleled in talent, passion, and character, Alex and Mike look forward to making at least one more amazing game before they die in a horrible freak accident. All right. That's probably the most interesting bio I've read to kick things off. So yeah, brother, let's kick it over to you. How did you get started in video games, and how did you? And a lot of people have that goal, have that dream, but you actually made it happen. So you can give a little of your story.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting path because I originally wanted to get into film, and so I wanted to do prosthetic makeup, and I wanted to do make monsters, and that kind of stuff. So I got into sort of making my own horror movies and stuff because most of the prosthetics were within horror movies, and so I'd read back then magazines of all things. I know to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, and then at a certain point there was a very clear delineation that this actual physical medium was going away and everything was going digital. And even within these magazines, they were telling people, get into CG, it's the future, that's where the jobs are going to be and everything. So I'm sort of a turning point when I was 18, when all this was happening, and so being an 18-year-old, I really like to play video games as well. And so I was like, well, maybe I should check out trying to develop video games. But back then there was no school or anybody was really teaching about like how to make video games. And on the flip side, if you were a warm body that could sit in front of a computer and figure out how to use some of the 3D software like Maya, you could get hired. It's like if you knew how to use the software, it's like, okay, we'll put you to work. So what I did start learning, trying to break into this, was computer-aided drafting. So I did CAD work for quite some time. But it basically just kind of evolved over the years. And then I had to make a couple of sacrifices to get into my first position at a game studio. And of course, the classic story where you start at the bottom and work your way up. But and then years and years of hard work, and we decided to start our own video game company. And I guess that was 8 years ago when we started the company. So that's sort of my Cliff's Notes of how I got to where I am today.
Yeah. Well, cool. I'd like to circle back to the a little bit more of the video game company thing, maybe some of your influence as well. But that's just it's just cool. It's like it's hard work, right? I mean, you have it in your own bio. What would you say is probably one of the hardest things about that?
It's interesting. This is something we talk about actually quite often because video games are a fairly unique. It's a unique media. So you have programmers working with artists, and the personality types of a programmer versus an artist is quite different. Then you have musicians and animators and producers and directors. And so basically, that old expression, herding cats, it sort of applies here. And so, it's kind of hard to explain, but being able to sort of figure out what people are good at, figure out who works with each other best, and sort of promoting that that's sort of like the hardest thing about the company. But other than that, the last couple of years, we've seemed to get into a rhythm. And so also, trying to keep that rhythm going, you have to work at it. It doesn't just sit there and self-propagate. So that's one thing that we, it's an aspect of it that's hard. And running a company, whether it's, a carpet cleaning company or a video game company, it's like running a company is a difficult thing to do. So you put that layer on top of everything else with the creatives and all that stuff. And it, it's a process, and anyone that runs their own company, I'm sure can.
Oh yeah, totally. That's great. I could talk to you about this for a long time. But, let's get to Tharsis, man. So Tharsis, I've played a game. I don't know if I described it accurately, but I mean, it's like a strategy-based game. It's a dice-based game. You basically have like 10 rounds plus to get your spaceship to Mars. There's been I look back at maybe some of the older copy blog posts. There's a huge asteroid that hit the ship. Now it's like a micro meteoroid shower.
Yeah.
Kind of see the evolution of the story over time. But basically, it's just I liked, as I play through it, the little cutscenes with the visuals of what's going on. It's got like some real science. It's got some fiction in there, some science fiction in there, and it kind of keeps you going. And I'll just say that I played about 2.5 hours, and it was like midnight. It was like 12:30. I'm like, I'm gonna beat this thing. And I got to the 10th week, and I don't know if this is a spoiler alert or not, but apparently just getting to 10 weeks isn't enough. I wasn't able to stick my landing, so I still got to figure that one out. But Tharsis, man,
I'm glad you got 10 weeks, because you should consider that an accomplishment.
I did until I didn't make it. But,
again, this is my piece of science fiction here. I'm with you with this Mars thing. I've my whole life I've been fascinated with Mars. This is not how I wish the first trip to Mars to be, because of course we want to make it there, and I think our space program, everything is so deliberate and well thought out. But yes, Tharsis is a very difficult game, but it's also sort of about all of these different challenges in actual life that we always have to weigh. And it's also sort of teaching people to make these really deep strategic thoughts. And I think if you could do it in Tharsis, some of that could also be moved over into real life as well. And it's also, if you made it to turn 10, I would say that you sat there and you considered what you were doing and where you were at any given time. And so it's also a point, where you kind of have to pause and look at the bigger picture. And that's one aspect about the game that I really like. And the game ended up sort of being less about Mars than the trip to Mars. So being such a Mars fan myself, I wanted to have more stuff going on at Mars, once we got to Mars, but we realized that there was more fun being had in the journey than the destination.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's I'm actually writing it's a novella thriller series called Mars Journey Call to Action, and it's basically about the first trip to Mars, how we pulled all together, international effort, getting up and out there. And it's like same thing. It's like you don't want it to be like, oh, this is crazy hard, or these things are going to happen in these challenges, but it's got to be entertaining. It's like, oh, we did engineering and we got there, and it's like, oh, okay, so
I know it'd be a very boring book.
It'd be a very boring book.
Everything went well and we made it to Mars.
Yeah, there we go. Cool. Thanks for your money. Oh, wait, you want it back? Oh, so what's the impetus, man? How did you come up with it? Your partners? Did you guys brainstorm?
So, this was actually, I had been thinking about this story for years before you mentioned that you saw one of the videos we made. The main story was based off of this whaling ship called the Essex, but the story of going to Mars and having it be this journey where these astronauts do things and it's difficult to get there. That was more based off the Apollo 13 mission, where it's like okay, we're basically on a satellite in the middle of nowhere. What do we have to work with? And that's all we have. But then I wanted to mix that with the story of the Essex, where it was kind of the same thing, where it was a whaling ship that got, it's the inspiration for Moby Dick.
Right.
And the ship got sunk by a whale, and they're floating around, and they're on these lifeboats, and it's like, what is, how can you maximize what you have, even if you have a very small amount of stuff. So that's where this cannibalism thing got introduced. And this is something that we were very cautious about, because cannibalism is such a difficult pill to swallow, if you will. But it's something that I'm sure NASA doesn't like to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's something that most people don't like to talk about. So, but it was something that I wanted in the game, because it is, it's a resource. We ended up handling it like, I didn't want cannibalism to be this gruesome thing. I didn't want it to be, this isn't a horror game. This is a strategy game. So we really wanted to take a lot of the weirdness of cannibalism out, and not put it totally in the forefront and make it like be the focus of the game.
Yeah.
But we wanted it to be sort of a resource. And so, also it's like, what decision are you making? Are you going to cannibalize, or are you going to try to stay true to yourself and try to make it? So we've noticed with playtesting the game, people don't want to use the cannibalism. It's like part of a human being, I think, is we're averse to wanting to eat each other. So it carries through in the virtual world. But there's also something interesting that happens is when you break down and finally use the cannibalism aspect, it just opens up the door, and people are like, okay, well, I've already done it. So, let's just go for it. So, but yeah, those were my basic two inspirations, was, Apollo 13 being the spark, and then the Essex was sort of like the kindling that kind of kept igniting the fire.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely, I took that, the cannibalism portion, and basically it gives you, more resources, more die that you can, roll to solve problems. And early when I was like, I'm going to go through and I'll use cannibalism like a tool. And then once I beat it and figure it out, then I'll have a higher challenge of not eating people, Well,
I also vote that when we go to Mars, that, I hope that there's a handshake between the crew, basically saying like, some form of agreement. One of the things we were well into making this game when the book The Martian came out. And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the game we're making. And I started getting a little wary of reading the book, because I didn't want to be influenced by it. And I was being interviewed the other day, and the interviewer referenced a part of The Martian that was in the book that wasn't in the movie, and it was a discussion that was being had that, I think one of the astronauts was talking to their dad, and they're like, well, we can make it with food,
Yeah.
And it's that I was like, oh no, like The Martian's gonna steal all my thunder. But the good news is the movie, the book was extremely popular, but the movie didn't go into that too much.
Yeah, I remember that. There's another portion where like they in the book they're talking about, well, if it's a survival thing, we have pills to take and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Whoa, they went there. And it's funny because I basically started coming up with this my series, a few years ago, and I really started like last year, last summer, or maybe it was the summer before. Yeah, it's two summers ago, really kind of writing it out and getting it started. And then I was telling somebody about it on a plane. And they're like, oh, it sounds like The Martian. And I'm like, no, it's this thing. Like, no, it's The Martian. It sounds like The Martian. I'm like, what's The Martian? And I started like, I saw it and I was like, what? I'm like, no. And I bought it. I bought the book and I just like, I'm not going to read it. And then people were just talking how good it is. And like, finally I read it and I was like, all right, it's different enough, And then it blew up.
Yeah.
So I highly
the zeitgeist of Mars stuff happening right now. I'm starting to see Mars everywhere. And I think especially like there's a bunch of Mars games coming out. I think we just hit sort of like the beginning of these Mars games coming out, Mars books coming out. And the hope is that all of this is going to accelerate and excite people for actually the trip to Mars and get it, to be something in people's minds.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And that's kind of where, I mean, even just the I Love Mars is basically, it's like for fans, sci-fi, science,
Everything.
news, updates, humor. And it really is where, I talking to certain writers groups and people are like, well, why are you doing Mars again? I'm like, I mean, literally, like, it's like basically like Westerns were cool. Everyone did like Westerns. I think Mars is gonna be the new, Mars Stearns.
Mars Stearns.
Mars Stearns, something like that. But also Mars stories have been around forever. It's essentially when you really start looking in. I think my wife was watching the original Twilight Zone series the other day, and one of the first Twilight Zones, they had a story about people going to Mars.
Yeah.
Somebody was mentioning The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury, or a collection of short stories. And I was just looking at today, and there's like 5 Mars-based stories. So it's part of us. It is just kind of great. You really do feel like there's just a lot of energy and direction coming around it.
Yeah, and also it's like, I mean, there's, hopefully in my lifetime, we will be in Mars. I mean, I think we definitely will be, but like, this is going to be my chance to see humans go to and or colonize another planet, and it's going to be Mars. It's not going to be anything else. So, that's the other exciting thing too. It's like, there it is. I go out into my deck at night when everyone in the house is asleep and it's quiet, and I'll go up and I look at Mars and I'm like, there you are, right there, staring me in the face. So.
Cool, brother. So we're to keep the interview under 30 minutes to help people actually watch it in case they have other things they want to do with their life.
Sure.
So we'll do one more question about Tharsis, and basically how did you guys research? How did you guys come up? I mean, how did you guys pick the name Tharsis, first of all? I mean, that's pretty specific. And then like how did you mix research with the actual gameplay in relation to Mars, like distance, time travel, things of that nature?
So we did just sort of a bunch of reading books and stuff, and there were, I think it's Mary Roach, Packing for Mars, was a book that was so filled with data that it's like, that was such a good research for us, even though it's not sort of like pure science. Everything she talks about is pure science. So that book was a big influence. Spending a lot of time on NASA's website, looking to issues that have actually happened. A lot of the events that happen in Tharsis are things that have happened actually on the ISS.
Yeah.
It's easier for us to sell something that's actually really happened because it's a truth. So researching in that aspect, we actually went down to SpaceX and took a big tour of the facility. One of our employees' brother is a rocket scientist, so we got a chance to kind of go through and talk and ask questions. Some of our employees did some. They took a tour of a NASA facility we have in the Bay Area, and was able to ask questions about certain things there. So it was basically a lot of internet research.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. Originally, we were going to be much more scientific about everything, and somewhere along the line, we made the decision that this is a game. It's not real, and sort of like we were saying earlier, it's like we need to make it entertaining. But yeah, it was a lot of internet research and reading books and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, good deal, and good thing that you guys are fans of the subject. And I like your guys' the Choice Provisions website, the updates, the humor, the pictures of everybody there, eating different food item.
Yes, we're a group of not so serious people but somehow we're able to get serious work done.
Cool. Yeah. So cool. So I did want to get to maybe just one of your tips that you would get for somebody that's watching that wants to get into video games. I know you consider yourself maybe a smaller size outfit compared to some of the larger ones that are out there.
Definitely.
And it seems like that you can not have your pick, but basically you can get, because you hear basically some of these horror stories of you just get into this coding farm, if you get into video game development.
Yeah.
These days, what are some things that someone could look for and actually have fun and pursue a career in this field?
So it's interesting. I mean, it's easier now than ever to make video games. So that's one aspect. And I think when we first started, originally it was 3 of us, and one of the things that it was all sweat equity, basically. We had some savings when we started the company, but one of the things I used to say often was, we can't fail, because failing would mean we have something to lose, and we just didn't have anything to lose. So it was like, so we went into it with this thing where it's like, okay, well, if we can't fail, then we can only go up from there. And keeping that in mind and working really hard are my two pieces of advice. Is just really starting slow with what you have, and just building upon that slowly. It's like we had no plans. I mean, when we started the company, there was no plans. Like the most employees we had was 20. We had no plans starting this company to have 20 employees. It just sort of organically happened over time, and we're very cautious. We don't hire up. We hire as needed. So I guess it's just like Tharsis. You got to be very wise about your decisions and make sure that you can make it to the end game.
Awesome. No, that's cool. It's a cool analogy, and it's good that your employees know that their livelihood is basically just tossed up to the roll of the die.
Exactly. That's why we should just start doing employee.
Should we hire this guy? I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah, we got a 2, a 6, and a 4. I don't know.
Awesome, brother. So Tharsis was definitely the focus of this. I'm super excited about it. But what are some maybe of the next projects that you got going on that you want to bring?
So Tharsis, there seems to be quite a bit of buzz around it. So we're going to keep maintaining it for a while. Something that, this isn't confirmed, but something we have talked about is what happens when you finally land on Mars. You haven't gotten there yet, so I'm not going to spoil it. But
all right.
when you land and then you find the thing that you're looking for on Mars, we might have like an expansion. And then another thing to mention is Tharsis is part of a 3-game series. So we already released a game called Laser Life. And if you remember in the beginning when that module explodes, one of the astronauts is in it and he shoots off into space. That's this other game we made is kind of stars him, even though he's a deceased astronaut. And that game, Laser Life, we actually went down and interviewed Story Musgrave, one of our great astronauts, and asked him if he wanted to be the narrator for the story. And I think we almost had him, but ultimately he had just had a kid, and he's still more robust than ever. But I think he's trying to enjoy his later years, and so he's such a busy man anyway. He kind of he turned us down, but so Laser Life's about that, and then we have another game that we want to do on Mars. That's part of the series that takes place, 1,000,000 years in the past on Mars. So really, Tharsis is part of a trilogy. So we'll probably move on to those. And in that story, we kind of explain through mythos why Mars is red.
Awesome. I love it. No, that's cool. Keeping everything kind of related. What was his name? Cross? Jay Cross? Was he?
Jay Cross. Yeah.
Jay Cross.
He's the star of Laser Life.
Yeah. Awesome, brother. So I really thank you for your time. I know you got going. This is launch week for you. I know you've been busy. I'm going to get this out to I Love Mars and share it with some other groups. And for the viewers out there, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more videos. Check out Tharsis. Check out Choice Provisions. I'm going to post a bunch of links below. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for your time, Mike.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill.
All right. Take care. Bye.